Hello, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson Ridley, and I'm really excited to be joined today by Alison Bladh, who is in a totally different part of the world. She's joining us from Sweden, and she's a registered nutritional therapist and beauty therapist who's living in the wilds of Sweden after falling for the charms of a Viking man. Having worked in the health and wellness industry for over 30 years, specializing in menopausal women's health, she now runs her own online clinic helping women worldwide manage the negative symptoms of menopause. Her mission is to support her clients with bespoke changes to diet, health, and lifestyle so they can harness their hormones and get their confidence and sparkle back. She believes that all women, no matter what age, deserve to reclaim their health and feel great. Life is too short to suffer symptoms that hold you back, and every woman has the right to feel and look amazing, even in midlife. So, Alison, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Alice. It's lovely to be here. Lovely to be here with you on your podcast today.
Yeah, and I'm excited. I was sharing with you, a lot of our listeners are in that age of menopause, and we were talking a little bit about the differences in how all that's going between the US and in Europe and England before Sweden. But so we might dive into some of that just because I find it fascinating. So I'm sure some other women will as well. But before we dive into all that, I'd love to just hear, what's brought you to working like with this segment of the population and what your journey's been. So it sounds like you've been doing that for a while.
Yeah, I have. I've been working with women's health, specifically menopausal health, for many years now, and it's an area I'm extremely passionate about. And I think my journey really started when I started work. I trained to be an esthetician. One of the reasons behind that was that I suffered from quite bad acne when I was a teenager, which can be hormonal based, and I felt so lost, and you lose your confidence, you've got bad skin. It's a very sensitive time of life as it is when you're a teenager, and it was hormone based, and I didn't really get the help that I needed. So I then myself became fascinated in hormones and why is this happening. And that's what led me into working with menopausal ladies with skin health issues such as acne, pigmentation, etc. And I very soon came to realize that, okay, you can, as an esthetician, you can get results, but you need to work from the inside as well. There was always a piece missing. So that's when I went back to university and studied nutritional science and worked as a nutritional therapist with menopausal, perimenopausal and postmenopausal women to, depending on what their symptoms were or how they felt, working very individually, giving them the support and the advice that they need to really feel better. And I mean, I remember when I was growing up, my mother, my grandmother, and, my mother's friends, when they were going through menopause, it wasn't spoken about. There was this like huge stigma attached to it that, oh, no, we don't talk about that, brush it under the carpet, and that they really suffered, but it just wasn't an area that was spoken about. And it was, I think maybe it's to do with, you're not fertile anymore. It doesn't have the same, as puberty, it's the new beginning, isn't it? But it's an area that needs to be spoken about more, because I mean, every single woman on the planet will go through it.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to look like we've made it out to look like I think you're absolutely right. There's this, I know, with sex life in general, for a lot of women that I know, there's the stigma, like we don't talk about that area down there, like I remember myself, I actually got my period when I was 9 years old. I didn't even know what it was. My son is the same age now. I just realized that. That's really weird. And it's like, and so I grew up in that culture of like, we don't talk about this stuff. And I think you're right. There's this, it's almost like, in some ways we feel like we're losing our place as a woman, and we can no longer enjoy sex or all of this that goes along with it. And none of that's actually true. So we can get into all that, but I just thought I'd.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't true at all. I mean, it's not a disease, is it? It's a life process. And I mean, when you have gone through perimenopause and menopause and you're in postmenopause, you can have 30 plus years left of your life, and that should be a time where you really enjoy yourself. And do everything that you want to do and have a fantastic life. And I mean, women, as they come into post-menopause and are older, we're wiser, we've got so much knowledge. I think older women, it's so empowering when you see these women that are setting up their own companies and doing really courageous things. It's
Yeah.
really inspiring.
Yeah. I've had a couple menopause conversations on the show, and one of the women I interviewed, she talked a lot about once we've gone through in menopause, we enter like this age of wisdom, and there's in different cultures, it's women like move into this really revered position, probably more in matriarchal societies that we have less of in the Western world, but and I've met women who have really embraced that and are like so empowered in just who they are and with all the wisdom they have to share with the world and like really just owning that, and others who are completely lost and like I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't know where to go. So let's maybe we can have the chat around what are some of the things, because first let's define, because there is a difference between perimenopause, menopause, and then postmenopause to some degree, I would say. So what do those terms encompass?
Yeah, the first stage is called perimenopause, and that on average it's very different for every woman, but on average that starts around the age of 45, but it can start earlier. It's very individual. And perimenopause, really the best way to describe that, it's the beginning of where your hormones start to decline, but they don't just suddenly stop. That it's like a roller coaster. So they're all over the place, and that is where you can start getting the classic symptoms. I mean, there are actually over 40 different menopausal symptoms, but things like hot flashes, weight gain, irritability, mood swings, brain fog, they're the things that can start just creeping up on you really in perimenopause. And then when you've gone through that, you go into what we call menopause, and menopause basically is when you haven't had a menstruation for a year. And then you are actually in menopause, and then you're not ovulating anymore. And then all the time after that is basically post-menopause. So that's when you're not fertile anymore, and you're not your body does produce a small amount of estrogen, but you're not producing the same amount of sex hormones that you do when you're premenopausal. So it's those three stages really that in very briefly on how to describe the transition.
I think that's helpful. I found a lot of women don't even fully grasp like what stage they're in, or that menopause means 12 months without a cycle. I have a couple clients, they're so mad at me because in working together their cycle came back at like month 11 and they thought they were finally there. I'm like, I'm sorry, but not really, because you weren't ready yet.
Yeah, no, that's quite frustrating, isn't it? You think, yes, I'm going into menopause, and then you have
but it's also a sign that like the body just wasn't ready yet. They're still, hormones are still doing their thing, and we did some healing that allowed that to happen. But and perimenopause, a lot of, I've read some research recently that it can actually be up to 16 years, which I'm sure no one wants to hear that, but we're going to talk about how you live well in that time.
It's so individual really, isn't it? Some women just glide through perimenopause and menopause, don't really have any symptoms, and then there's women really have a tough time with all the symptoms, and they lose confidence. You can actually get depressed, suffering from depression. So it can be really tough for a lot of women, and it can start before the age of 45. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what have you found in all of your, and I'll just ask this, and if you don't have a great answer for it, that's totally fine. But, in your experience, have symptoms been getting more extreme in in the last, 5 to 10 years? And if so, what do you think the reason is behind that, or what have you seen? I'm more curious than anything.
That's a great question, because I've thought about that, and the answer is I've seen over the years how with how we live our lifestyles now, because it seems like everybody is chronically stressed. That's one of the big things that I think plays a huge issue in how we go through the menopause transition. and also the food that we eat. It's just becoming more and more refined, sugary. Everything is just so processed. So I've seen over the years that because of the food that we eat, the convenience foods, that this is shown in research, that a lot of the processed sugary foods trigger off symptoms, especially like hot flashes, and weight gain, brain fog, and everything. And I think years ago, the diet that we ate in Europe was better. I mean, we ate whole foods. There wasn't so much when I was growing up, that we didn't really have processed foods. And that gave you your experience through menopause was much easier. And then stress. I mean, stress is a huge thing in society, and it really, because of the stress hormones, cortisol in particular, when your body's releasing that hormone all the time, it triggers off certain things in your body, and this can lead to having a worse experience of menopause, going back to the hot flashes again, weight gain. It's really detrimental for everything. Sleep, you can't sleep if you're anxious and stressed. And I think those are the main things that I've seen that have increased over the years, really. Stress and the foods that we eat and how they've affected our health, really.
Yeah. I have to be honest, it's almost depressing to hear that about Europe, because, the US is like, our food guidelines and standards are pitiful. We'll just put it that way. And Europe is always, because I lived in Europe in 2005. And so, there was still, looking back, there was definitely processed stuff, but like there's limits on what it is. But even then, it's like, okay, so ladies listening, don't get depressed by this, but in the US, we're also not alone, right? And this is starting to be a worldwide thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's definitely a worldwide thing. I mean, yeah, the US is, I think in general, there's a lot of fast food restaurants, and people, it's the way society is, and you tend to eat out more or get takeaways. But I mean, it isn't. Europe's becoming the same. There's restaurants everywhere. There's the processed foods, easy, convenient, doesn't take time to cook. But it's really becoming a problem, not just with people going through menopause, with people's health in general.
Yeah. I mean, you can trace in the US, the top 5 killers, and we have some of for those listening, I'm just going to throw this little stat at you because it hasn't changed since I graduated from chiropractic school, I don't know, 15 years ago. But the US ranks 37th out of 40 in like overall health of the people who live there. I'm not sure where Sweden tends to be actually higher up. I don't know how that's changed in the last few years, but all of our major disease killers, the chronic heart disease, diabetes, all that stuff can be traced back to food and stress. So these are, like matters for menopause, matters for quality of life in general.
No, it's fascinating as well, which I can really, talk about the food environment and why it is like that. The thing that's so interesting is that we do actually really know what we should be eating. We know that it's better to eat whole foods and fruit and vegetables, but we just don't do it, do we?
Yeah. And and I think a lot of it is like we've got a huge uphill battle with in the US, and this might be spilling over to Europe now too. There's a lot of money in the marketing and all the stuff that goes into the cheap food, into the not real food. It's easier. A lot of it has chemicals that make our bodies dependent on it and want more. We're fighting a really uphill battle. So this is a fun topic for this. Like, how do we start to impact that? What's like the first thing we decide to do something different?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because the food giants are so powerful. I think it is just getting the word out there, just really constantly talking. That you can see there's some fantastic functional medicine doctors, especially in the US, that are really behind this, and they're really say how it is, and we shouldn't be eating these foods because they're toxic, and the obesity epidemic, and it's just affecting our hormones, and and hunger hormones and everything. But it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because there's so much power behind these big food corporations.
Yeah. So we've got that. Plus, we all live such fast-paced, crazy lives that, the majority of people are not like, we're not prioritizing meals or cooking. I even work from home, and if I have to cook more than one meal a day, it doesn't happen. I'm just like, it's not my favorite thing, and I know the importance of it, and I know that I feel better when I am eating well, and I'm still a cycling female, so but I have less PMS symptoms and less, you know, crazy mood swings, and I've learned quickly that dairy is a great way for me to be really mad at everybody and have a sore throat, so I don't eat it anymore.
No,
There's
it's
yeah.
knowing your body as well, isn't it? And knowing
Yeah.
what works for you. But it really doesn't have to, when you think of menopause, perimenopausal and menopausal health, it doesn't have to be complicated. Like
Mhm.
you were saying that, you maybe don't have time, or you're quite happy cooking one meal a day, but it's just about planning and being
Mhm.
realistic and having something in the fridge that you can just grab that's healthy. You don't
Yeah.
have to cook a huge, big, luxurious meal every day. It's just making sure that your fridge is full of good, healthy things, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And, some of the maybe we can go through, I don't know what tips and tricks you have, but some of the things I have my clients do or do myself is like I'll have a day where I actually chop up a bunch of vegetables and then I squirt a little lemon on them so they keep and I can throw them in whatever. Because if when I cook, it's usually some sort of stir fry with meat and veggies, and I may or may not have a grain in there. Um, and so you can prep, or I cook enough and hope that my house full of teenage boys don't eat it all so that I have, you know, extra for lunches or dinners,
Yeah, it's
or recycle
preparation.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
planning
Yeah.
and planning. What whether you do it the weekends or just have a day where you plan what you're going to eat for the week ahead. So
Yes.
that, on Monday I'm going to have roast chicken and salad, and then I'm going to have whatever, but just having a plan. But I can imagine having teenagers in the house must be difficult because they're constantly hungry, aren't they?
Yes.
Constantly
Yeah.
to eat. So, you
Yeah.
really probably have to have quite a fair amount of food there, I can imagine.
Always. Yeah. And that's the other thing. Well, and we only have them half the time, but they tend to come by because they all drive, you know, even on the not our weeks and just like raid our fridge. So it's, we all have our environment that we're in, but it's ultimately it's about figuring out what works for you and making the decision that you're going to value and what you put in your body, and just like you have to make the commitment. That's
Yeah, but there's
that's
no
what it comes
easy
down to.
way. You have
Mm-mm.
to want to do it. And like I say, it doesn't have to be complicated, but if you want to improve your health and have a better menopausal transition, you have to make that decision and think, no, I'm going to look after myself now and put my health
Yeah.
first. And also lifestyle and mindset, they all really come into play during this time period, but you have to want to do it. You've got to
Yes.
have a little motivation there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And choose to put yourself first. This is something I talk about on the show a lot. Is the concept that I call selfless syndrome. And we're at the time we're recording this, I'm rebranding the show to the selfless syndrome show. But we've got to get that mindset shift. And I see more women in their 40s and 50s and kind of that transitionary period who are recognizing that and ready to do that. So that's
No,
encouraging
it's
to me.
crucial.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you have to put yourself first, because no one, women, we're carers, aren't we, women? And I think that we're
Hmm.
so used to looking after everybody else. It's time when you come into midlife and into post-menopause that you can actually put yourself first and
Yeah.
think about what you eat and think about your lifestyle and movement and exercise and also mindset. That it's very, I see with my clients that it's very easy during menopause to get into this kind of negative spiral, because there's so much stigma attached to menopause, and you think all the symptoms and, oh, it's terrible. But you really have to kind of think of it in a more positive way and embrace it in a positive way, because it just becomes all so negative if you don't really think like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. All good. Sorry, I'm just thinking through all good things. So, we, either for yourself or for anyone listening, like it can also be overwhelming, right? To really like decide to put yourself first and start cooking if you haven't been, and make time for yourself in ways you haven't before. So, do you have any recommendations on where you have clients start, or like how do you ease ease people into the process of starting to make some change?
Yeah, I work very individually with clients on a one-to-one basis because when clients come to me, they have different goals. So it really depends on whether it's weight loss or they're exhausted or overwhelmed or stressed. So we really focus in on their goals, and then working with the functional medicine model where you look at the whole person. So, for example, if you're suffering from migraines, you would really get to the root cause of that rather than just saying, okay, you've got a migraine, do this. We really want to know
Yeah.
why that is happening. And it's fascinating to really go back and look at that person's life and really maybe find the reason why that's happening. So we do a very in-depth health analysis, and then put together a nutritional lifestyle program for that person, which they would work on over a 3-month period. Some clients I work longer with. It depends on your goals. And then supporting them, that's so important. It's difficult to make change, isn't it? We've all got habits that we've had for years, and all of a sudden, you think, oh, maybe if you like a glass of wine in the evenings, that's fine, but that can increase menopausal symptoms like hot flashes. So even just something as simple as maybe not having that every night, it can be difficult to implement. So I really give them the support every week. We talk every week. We go through the plan and see how it's working, make adjustments, and then maybe do functional testing if that's needed, depending on the client. Thyroid can come into play during menopause, like digestive issues, gut issues. There's a lot of different testing you can do for that, and possibly supplementation if needed. I always like to say food first. There might be situations where you maybe would need to take certain supplements if you're deficient in something. So it's really a whole approach to the whole body, and giving the person that support that they need, because I don't want people to feel stressed and overwhelmed. It has to be like a program that fits in with their life.
Yes. Yeah. That's huge and key. And I find, a lot of the women I work with are what we would call overachieving type A personalities. And so, we can be driven by this, like, oh no, I need to fix it like right now, like yesterday, and oh, I'm just going to do everything. And that, it's really a recipe for disaster. You've got to be realistic about what's your life like right now, and what can you realistically do to give yourself wins and start, building that relationship with yourself again. Because I think by the time we've hit menopause, or perimenopause, we've maybe been trying to do things that used to work and don't work anymore, and have kind of burnt ourselves out in the process. So recognizing that as well.
It could be really small things like, just drinking more water. That makes a huge difference. And people water, I drink water, but a lot of people don't drink as much water as they should, and that can really make you feel better.
Yeah, it's huge. That's actually one of I start with breathing and water, like learn how to breathe again, because most of us have forgotten, and drink half your body weight in ounces of water.
Yeah, brilliant. Breathing. I think I love that. It's so crucial, especially for stress management.
Yeah. And for those who are dealing with weight stuff, there's a bunch of research now that shows deep breathing actually helps you lose weight. It's mostly by reducing stress, but all those pathways are connected. So
no, and it's such an easy thing to do, isn't it? Just to breathe. It doesn't cost anything, and you can do it anywhere,
anytime. You just have to remember. Yeah, it's very, very important. So because you're in the nutritional world, I'm going to ask you this question because I get it from a lot of my clients. Are there specific foods that you either want to eat more of or avoid in the perimenopausal time period?
Yeah. Okay, if we start with the ones you should avoid, it again mean, it's going back to the sugary, that you should certainly avoid processed sugary foods, really try to reduce sugar. And the reason for that is the blood sugar balance. One of the reasons, you want to get your blood sugar balanced, because the a hormone called insulin, which regulates blood sugar, you can, as you go into menopause and your estrogen levels decline, it becomes more common that you can become insulin resistant, which means your body doesn't react to insulin like it should. And it's due to the decline in hormones. So eating these sort of sugary refined foods that shoot your blood sugar up are not good for your overall health. So really cutting out processed foods. Alcohol, it's not, I know many of my clients that, the odd glass of wine is fine. I'm not saying that, but many of them actually given up drinking because they say it's just not worth the way it makes me feel. Even if I just have a glass, I get hot flashes, I get night sweats, I can't sleep, and I feel terrible the next day. So really maybe thinking of reducing alcohol. And then caffeine as well is a big thing during menopause. Is, think about the drinks that you're having with caffeine in, because they can really stimulate symptoms and also affect your sleep, which can be a problem during perimenopause. And you have to watch salt as well in your diet, because blood pressure can go up during menopause, cholesterol levels. You really need to think about not adding maybe salt on all your food, just thinking being a bit more mindful of the salt content and how much salt you actually eat. So they're the things that, some of the things that you should really think about avoiding. And there's certain foods that you should eat. You should really eat what we call a Mediterranean style diet. And there's actually research to back this up, that style of diet is just wonderful for menopausal and overall health. And it's actually a very easy way of eating. Fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, all your lovely healthy fats like olive oil, avocados, coconut oil, butter, and then fish and white meat. In the Mediterranean diet, they don't actually eat very much red meat. They do eat red meat, but very occasionally. And then legumes and beans, and it's that way of eating is been shown to be very, very beneficial. And then really thinking about bone health, because bone health can your bones can become less dense when we come into menopause due to estrogen levels. So really making sure that you eat foods that are rich in calcium, vitamin D and vitamin K. And crucial for that as well is strength training to keep your bones happy. And then there's a lot of different I know that it must be so overwhelming for people, because there's so many different supplements on the market for menopause, that claim to do this and that. When you look at the research, there isn't really many that are backed up by solid research to say that these supplements. I mean, phytoestrogens, I've actually done a fair amount of research on phytoestrogens, and they've been shown, like soya and flax seeds, to help manage certain menopausal symptoms, and they are in general very good for you. They have a similar chemical structure to estrogen, so that they're not estrogen, but they have that similar chemical structure. So I think adding these into the diet really can help to balance out menopausal symptoms. And also soya and those soya products are very good, high in calcium, so they're very good for bone health as well.
Okay, that's actually something I didn't know, which is interesting. And I'm sure you do too, with soy. Well, in the US, and I think this is probably true worldwide, like the really cheaply produced crops that are insanely messed with and not good for you are corn, soy, and wheat for us. But I love like edamame, which is, I can find organic, like non-GMO, if you can find organic non-GMO soy stuff,
totally
then eat it. Yeah,
absolutely. Soy is great, but you have to look at the source of it and make sure that it's not full of chemicals and being genetically modified. Yeah, you have to be mindful of what you're buying. Absolutely. And one other thing, sorry, another crucial thing that I should say is protein. That's a big thing in female health. In general, we don't eat enough protein, but you really need that when you're coming into menopause for muscle strength, because we lose or we can lose muscle, and also for bone health. It's like the building blocks of the body, protein. They say you should really eat a palm size of protein with every meal that you eat, and that can be in the form of chicken, fish, whatever you eat, soya products if you don't eat meat. So quality protein.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I end up talking with a lot of women about here, and I'm sure you've seen as well because you're working worldwide, is we actually have to eat. I meet far too many women who, in an effort, because our bodies are changing and putting on weight and like all this stuff is happening hormonally, we tend to try to go to the things that have always been taught, which is like eat less, work out more, but that we take it so extreme, it's tanking our metabolism and like creating even more stress on the body. So
yeah, it doesn't.
having meals,
research, backs this up, that like real restrictive diets, fad diets don't work. Okay, of course you'll lose weight initially if you're not taking in any calories and working out all the time, but it's not realistic and it's not sustainable, and you will stop doing that. And the majority of the times you put more weight on when you start eating again. So now fad diets, it's finding a style of eating that suits you, that's healthy, that you can do every day.
Yep. And it stops being a diet. The favorite definition of diet I've heard recently is, did I eat today? And I love that. Like, you're eating to fuel your body. That's your diet.
Eat nutritious foods. I mean, and look after your body. It's not nice, and it's stressful to starve yourself. You'll just make yourself in the end feel worse. Yeah,
absolutely. Really, really great. Well, in the interest of, I try to keep these at a time that everyone can consume them in one sitting. But is there anything we haven't hit on? Just to kind of recap for everyone, we've talked a lot about stress and kind of what the stages of menopause and perimenopause, postmenopause are. Some of the things you can do, how you should really be fueling your body with food. Is there anything else that we would like to share in wrapping up?
I think we've spoke about bone health, which is a crucial thing, and there's a few other areas that you really have to, because a lot of people, which I totally understand, you're very focused on the symptoms that you're having at the moment, which is totally understandable, but bone health is something that we really need to look after in postmenopause, and that's really crucial. But also heart health, gut health, and brain health, because they're all things, it all goes back to the estrogen. Estrogen receptors we have all over the body, and when the estrogen starts to decline, it affects every area of the body. And heart disease goes up as we get older as women. And brain health, making sure that you're eating all the wonderful healthy fats and the omega-3 oils to keep your brain in good condition. And then gut health, looking after your microbiome, which is your gut bacteria, with fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, all those wonderful, what we call probiotics, which are the good bacteria that live in the digestive tract. And there's loads of research on that now, so we're really starting to understand how important that is for, it's not just gut, the gut brain connection, and even skin now is, you have your own microbiome on the skin. So it's eat those fermented foods. Sauerkraut's easy to make at home, and kimchi and tempeh, and whatever you like.
And just finding a way to make it work for you. But all really great. So how can our listeners connect with you if they want more Alison in their life?
The best or the easiest way is through my website, and that's alisonbladh.com. And on the website I have a resources page where there's lots of free downloads, ebooks, like for example the Mediterranean diet that we were talking about. There's a meal plan and shopping list and recipes there, just to give you to get you going, really, to give you an idea of good meals to eat during perimenopause and menopause. And there's things on skin health and lots of delicious recipes. So, feel free to go there and download anything you wish. And then I'm on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, and you can find me under Alison Bladh.
And I'll put links to all that in the show notes.
Thank you.
So, well, thank you so much for joining us from Sweden. I know when we're recording this, it's later in the evening for you, so I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it's lovely talking to you, Dr. Alison. No, don't worry. I think it's about 8:30 here now, so it's not that late. But yeah, It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Absolutely.